course, the backbone of the Dark Elf gameplay are slaves. When managed correctly, they ensure you're swimming in gold Scrooge McDuck style, and can be used to buff nearly every area of campaign gameplay. Sadly, the focus on slaves and generating as much as possible leads to a ton of rebellions in every province you take, and while you can just farm these for even more slaves, it still has you going back and forth to clean this up. Speaking of rebellions, when playing the Dark Elves, you have the loyalty mechanic to deal with, which means lords are as needy as newborn puppies and need constant love and attention, otherwise they'll whiz on your kitchen floor and rebel against you. The one army type that does not suffer from this, however, are the Black Arks, and while they're bound to the sea, they let you have mobile bases and take your conquest basically anywhere on the map with their insane abilities. And finally, as an evil faction, anyone who isn't a fellow evildoer will hate you by default, and there's a good chance the rest won't be much fond of you either. Now let's first go through the faction's campaign mechanics. First of all, obviously, slaves. All Dark Elf factions can gain slaves via a number of means. Winning battles captures a percentage of enemy casualties, which can be upgraded via Lord skills, and increased by the post-battle option. They can gain slaves by raiding, stacking and looting settlements, rewards from missions, and certain buildings such as the slave keeping chain gains them per turn. Your total slaves maximum capacity is displayed at the top of the screen, and this capacity is increased by every main settlement building you have and its level. Being above a certain percentage of slaves also offers your faction various bonuses. Having a large amount will benefit nearly every building in your faction by unlocking special effects when over a certain threshold, so collecting as many as possible should be a high priority. They can also be spent on a number of things to further benefit the faction. Certain commandments cost slaves to maintain, which we'll cover shortly, some buildings require them to be built or simply consume an amount per turn for maintenance, and diktats. And no, these are not body art on your gentleman's vegetable, they are instead special effects that can be enacted in your provinces at the cost of slaves. Fights to the death increases control for 5 turns at the cost of 400 slaves, Open Markets increases control for 5 turns and generates gold at the cost of 600 slaves, and Slave Drive increases growth and reduces construction cost for 5 turns at the cost of 400 slaves. And finally, slaves can be spent on rights. These are of course 4 abilities unlocked after performing certain actions and can be activated to grant the faction bonuses at the cost of 800 slaves, at least for this base set. The Sacrifice to Mathlan will grant a Black Ark to the recruitment pool, the Sacrifice to Hekati will increase magic reserve for all armies and increases XP gain, XP per turn and hero success chance for sorceresses for 5 turns, the Sacrifice to Cain will increase casualties captured post-battle, income from post-battle loot, casualty replenishment, and unlock the Dark Conduit army ability for 15 turns, and Sacrifice to Athati will grant generic lords the chance to gain 2 loyalty and grant 8 control in all provinces for 5 turns. Next up we have the Black Arks. These are essentially moving bases that can be unlocked using the right we just mentioned. Once you have capacity, you can recruit one from any dock settlement, and make sure you choose one with water close to where you need to go, as these guys cannot go on land, so getting from the east to the west of the Fallen Gates can take you potentially hours of time. Aside from not being able to go on land, these arks work like any other army in your roster, but can do so much more. They have a horde-like building section where they can upgrade the ark to grant bonuses to not only themselves, but also any armies inside their very large area of effect. You have recruitment buildings allowing them to recruit the entire roster from anywhere on the map. You have buildings to upgrade the army abilities they grant when armies are in their area of effect, and you have general infrastructure buildings such as increasing growth, replenishment, post-battle loot, and unit rank and XP gain. I'd recommend going the growth building first and then getting the ark to the maximum size as fast as possible. This will max out the growth and then you'll be able to build anything you want as long as you have the gold for it without having to wait too long. I'll let's go for the army abilities, then any recruitment buildings I need for my endgame composition, but honestly everything here is great, so experiment with what you like the best. And finally we have loyalty. Loyalty does exactly what it says in the tin. When you recruit a generic lord, they have a loyalty level that can be increased by winning battles with them, giving them a strong army, and it decreases by taking units from them and having them losing battles or taking a lot of attrition. If the loyalty drops enough, the lord can leave the faction taking all the units in the army with them as a new rebel faction, which you'll then need to take out to avoid even more trouble. If they get to a higher level than your legendary lord, they also have an increased risk of losing loyalty, so you've got to really manage these guys to keep them on side. Next up we have the commandments. Demand highborn hostages increases control, enforce tribute payments increases income from buildings, sacrifices for Cain increases post-battle loot faction-wide, recruit rank and weapon strength for all armies in the province at the cost of slaves. That makes this one a great choice when you're doing a lot of fighting or recruiting in the province. Increase slave production quota increases growth and income from slaves at the cost of slaves, so it's of course great for building up settlements quickly and making a little extra cash while doing it. And Read Dark Portents reduces enemy hero success chance and increases ambush success chance and the chance of intercepting enemy armies using underway-like movement stances. This makes it a great choice when enemies are in your lands and you need to catch them out to get rid of them. Now we come to the different factions. First up we have Nagarond, and they are led by Malekith the Witch King. Their bonuses from alliances and buffs to relations with other Dark Elves make them a perfect faction for uniting everyone under one banner, either as a super alliance or confederating everyone to rule the mountains. Of course, being the king, he has more loyal recruits, so there's an easier time keeping control of them to start off with. and he can make use of the cheaper core units for pretty much the entire game. Of course, his ruler status buffs whatever province he's in, keeping it under control and allowing cheaper buildings, and enemies fear him, suffering leadership penalties just for being in the same region. Of course, the faction starts in Nagarond, and for the starting units, they have a unit of Black Guard of Nagarond, 2 Bleak Swords, 2 Dread Spears, 2 Dark Shards, and 1 unit of Cold One Chariots, as well as a Sorceress of Fire. Their climate preferences, frozen, chaotic wasteland, and temperate island are suitable, mountains, temperate, savanna and jungle are unpleasant, and magical forest, wasteland, ocean and desert are uninhabitable. For their victory conditions, you must destroy Attain and control Lorthan, as well as occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. The starting war with the Skaven will net you your first whole province on 1 turn if you play it right. After that, you have a couple of options on which direction you go in, since the rats are basically everywhere. You can head south to the Iron Mountains, west to the Iron Coast, or southeast to the Black Flood, and find rats no matter what you pick. All these options will net you an unpleasant climate preference, so just based purely on who you're fighting and the land you'll get, I'd say the Iron Coast is the best, and yes, Grumbrindle can pose a challenge, but you'll be less of a challenge now than you will be later on, and you get the province capital instantly, so have a nice base of operations to work from. This also avoids lots of turns moving without fighting, which you want to avoid early on to maximise income and progress. After this, you can loop up through the Iron Mountains and then down to the Black Flood, so it all ends up taken anyway. While doing this, use Quick Deal to get some packs going with other Dark Elves, focusing on the legendary factions to start building relations for possible confederations. Plus, getting as much trade as possible is just free money. After this, I'd go south, taking out any minor factions that get in your way, and won't ruin your relations with others. This is going to get you close to Mommy Morathi, but also lure them for that short victory. Once you reach the Moonshard, hop across to Ulthuan and conquest your way around, taking out every high elf you can on your way to take on Tyrion. Take the whole donut if you can, and by that point you should have, or at least be very close to these victory conditions pretty easily. Next up we have the Cult of Pleasure, and they are led by Morathi the Witch Mommy. Morathi's faction gets a little closer to chaos than the others, and as such spreads Slaanesh corruption wherever she goes, which grants various bonuses to slaves, as well as control and the usual attrition. She can also recruit demonettes to give her army an extra chaotic edge, using her unique Cult of Pleasure building chain. And as Mother of Sorceresses, she can unlock and use them cheaper, so don't be afraid to spam casters when you play her. Morathi's army's only special ability is making armies in the same region more loyal to her, which we can only assume is from a stern talking to, and nothing else. She can also use the Ratificati more often, and for less cost than the others to buff those casters even more. Her faction starts in the ancient city of Quintex, and for her starting units, she has 2 Witch Elves, 1 unit of Demonettes of Slaanesh, 2 units of Dread Spears, and 2 Shades, as well as a Knight Assassin. Her climate preferences are the same as Malekith, and for her victory conditions, she must destroy Haganeth and then the 30 settlements. The starting war will net you a lot of land if you take it to completion. The only one I'd say to raise would be Ironspike. It's just not worth taking since the rest of the province is unpleasant, so it ends up being a hassle to stay in control just to get iron. Instead, head east and north, taking out Bleakhold and Dracula Coven as you'll make your way over to take on Crone. You can make friends with Malekith once you find him, but aside from that, you're probably going to struggle to get on with pretty much anyone else. If it's anything like my campaign, she'll do some minor expansion, but still be limited to a fairly compact area, so I'd head over the sea from the Circle of Destruction with a Black Ark as backup and aim to take her capital when she's not looking. After that, it should be fairly straightforward to take her out, just bring a couple of armies to make sure she doesn't overwhelm just the one. Once that's done, you can expand anywhere you want to get the rest of the settlements, with Chaos and the Dark Elves being the main courses on the menu. Next up, Haganeth, and they're led by Crone Hellebron. Crone's faction has access to the unique Death Knights mechanic. This is basically a bar at the top of the screen that can be filled by consuming increasing amounts of slaves, and then it slowly drains. When the bar is full, the faction gains a variety of buffs to armies and settlements, as well as summoning blood voyagers. These are basically rogue armies that are allied with you and work like any other alliance, with you slowly earning allegiance over time, which can then be spent on ordering them to attack and defend certain targets. When the bar empties, the buffs will run out, and the blood voyagers will take severe attrition, eventually being wiped out, as well as other faction debuffs. Basically, you want to make sure you stay at least in the middle bar at all times to keep your faction healthy, powerful, and moving forward. Hellebron's faction swaps the Sacrifice to Hecate for one to Drakira, which focuses on Death Hags and Witch Elves, as well as granting bonuses to any army battling High Elves. This works excellently with the increased capacity for Death Hags right out the gate, so getting a few online early is never a bad thing. She's also an expert slaver, with her whole faction capturing more post-battle, having an increased capacity and income, as well as the reduced cost to the Sacrifice to Cain. Of course, being the queen of the Witch Elves, Crone focuses on units in this vein in her own army, granting upkeep and damage bonuses to Witch Elves, Sisters of Slaughter, and Haganeth Executioners. Her faction, of course, starts in Haganeth, and for her starting army, she has 1 unit of Haganeth Executioners, 1 unit of Sisters of Slaughter, 1 unit of Bleak Swords, 3 units of Dread Spears, and 2 units of Dark Shards, as well as a Death Hag hero. Her climate preferences, again, the same as Malekith, and for victory conditions, you must defeat the Cult of Pleasure and control the ancient city of Quintex, either through ownership or alliances and vassals. The starting war will get you plenty of land heading to the north and east if you really want to wipe them out. After this, you basically do the opposite of Morathi and instead head south, taking on any minor factions you encounter along the way, and getting a ton of land under your control. Just the same as Morathi, make sure you have a couple of armies and an ark to back you up when you get to her lands, just to make sure you can take her on. Next up we have the Blessed Dread, and they are led by Lokhir Felheart. Lokhir's faction swaps the Sacrifice to Mathlan, Fun to Anathrema, which has a ton of buffs for nearly every area of gameplay, with a special attention for Corsair units. As a pseudo-pirate lord, he can also recruit black arks faster and in greater numbers than any other faction as long as he keeps taking port capitals, and this pirate status also grants him some increased income from slaves for some extra cash. This pirate nature continues into his army focus, with buffs for Corsair units and immunity to most forms of sea-based attrition. His faction starts in Naichai, and for his starting units he has 2 black ark corsairs, 2 dread spears, 2 black ark corsair handbows, 1 unit of shielded dark shards, 1 feral manticore, and 2 units of black ark corsairs in a nearby black ark army, as well as a sorceress of death. For his climate preferences, frozen, temperate island, savannah and jungle are suitable, chaotic wasteland is unpleasant, magical forest, wasteland, mountain, ocean and desert are uninhabitable. For his victory conditions, he must control 5 of the Cathaian coastal regions either by ownership or alliances and vassals, as well as the 30 settlements. Follow the starting war to the south and you'll end up deep in the South Cathay coastline. If you keep your ark moving with Lokhir, you should be able to smash through the area, taking a ton of land in the process and knocking both victory conditions out in record speed. I know that seems like I'm rushing through it, but that's really all there is to it. All the required settlements are in this area, so just follow the river with the black ark and take out factions one by one to get control of them all. Next up we have Hagrief, and they're led by Malus Darkblade. Malus shares his body with the demon Sarkhan, but can keep control by the use of elixirs. Being at a high level of possession offers Malus many buffs to himself, as well as his faction and army, at the cost of corruption infecting his lands and causing him severe control issues. Being at the low level offers buffs to settlements and his unique Rite of the War Master, which summons a powerful army of monsters, at the cost of Malus being drastically weaker in combat. The demon also whispers in Malus's ear at all times, offering him rewards in exchange for completing specific actions. These are often war declarations and attacking armies and settlements that are pretty out of your way. He also has a couple of unique rights. We already mentioned the Rite of the War Master, and the Gift of the Witch King, which offers you a hero of your choice that spawns in the same rank for the number of settlements Naggarond currently controls. These two replace the rights of Athati and Hekati. Finally, his demonic tendencies also make him a great capitalist, granting him increased income from all mine buildings, including Emerald, but I haven't spotted any of those in game just yet. Of course, his demonic status offers army protection from undivided chaos attrition, as well as chaos wastes. Aside from that, he's an equestrian at heart, but has more of a love of cold ones and horses, so brings economic buffs for those units in his army. For his starting location, you own Hagrief, but your armies start outside of Black Rock. For his starting units, he has 1 unit of Bleak Swords, 2 units of Dread Spears, 2 units of Dark Shards, 2 Cold One Knights, 1 unit of Scourge Runner Chariots, and a Bloodwrack Medusa, as well as 2 Black Ark Corsairs in a nearby Black Ark army, and he starts with a Master Hero. For his climate preferences, he has the same as Malekith, but mountain moves to suitable, and for his victory conditions, he must win the Warp Sword of Cain quest battle as well as the 30 settlements. So all you have to do to get the quest battle is get to level 7, so you can do pretty much whatever you like, and then get all the settlements. The starting war will take you west, where you can continue moving to take on a bunch of chaos factions, including Siggy and his vassal. Going this way will get you back into the Dark Elf lands and close to Hagrief, should you choose to keep it, which you absolutely can if you want these days, since it's no longer the opposite end of the world. Once you get there, you can complete your province by taking out the resident rats and expand wherever you want to get the rest of the settlements you need. You can keep the ark with you the whole time for added buffs, so this should be a relatively easy time if you keep both moving at the same time. And finally, we have Rakarth, who leads the 1000 Moors. Rakarth's faction can capture monsters by raiding, fighting and occupying all over the map. The monsters you receive post-battle change depending on where you are and who you're fighting against, and these can be recruited into your armies regardless of any buildings. This lets him get an insanely powerful army far earlier than nearly anyone else in the game, so press this advantage as much as possible to make the most of the early lead. His expertise with monsters also allows him to upkeep them for less, allowing even more of them into his armies. And as a prolific raider, Rakarth has learned the secrets to pace himself and his army, granting them no vigor losses when in the raiding stance. His monstrous focus follows him to his own army, where he can get them faster and teach them to stay alive longer to feed his beastly conquest. And of course, a legendary Beast Lord has some abilities right out the gate to keep control of his beasts, should they step out of line. His faction starts on the Great Turtle Isle, and for his starting army, he has 2 Bleak Swords, 2 Dread Spears, some Great Sword Shades, a War Hydra, and a Reaper Bolt Thrower, as well as a Sorceress of Beasts. For his climate preferences, he has the same as Malekith, but Savannah and Desert move to suitable. And for his victory conditions, he must win the Whip of Agony quest battle, control the Turtle Isles either directly or via alliances and vassals, as well as the 30 settlements. You just need to take the starting province for one of the victory conditions, so follow the starting war all the way to take it all and check one off as soon as possible. After that, you just need rank 7 for the quest battle and the settlements, and pretty much every direction you go is suitable, so choose who you want to fight and get going. Dark Elf allies are to the top, so your best bets are to the east to take on Chaos, or south for the Tomb Kings. And finally we come to the Dark Elf research tree. This is separated into 4 tiers, and each tier has 3 main techs that must be researched before you can upgrade to the next one at the cost of gold. These 3 main techs also have 3 sub-techs of their own that offer other rewards. If you want to stick around, it's all the usual stuff, with each section focusing on one of military, infrastructure, or a bit of both. I'd recommend picking up any techs that help with your slave economy to keep your stocks full and money coming in consistently. For military, I'd just pick up anything that's going to be useful to your armies for the next few turns and upgrade whenever you can easily afford to. There's no harm in unlocking all the tiers when you have tons of cash to burn and coming back to pick your way through the techs at the end. By that point, your speed should be vastly improved, so you can fly through them and gain a ton of powerful bonuses for a tasty late game power spike. And that is everything you need to know to play the Dark Elves in Immortal Empires, but if you want to know how to play all the other factions in Total War Warhammer 3, then check out this playlist here for all my other faction guides.